Hi, I'm Mark Graban from Value Capture, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Habitual Excellence. We're joined today by Ken Snyder. He's the Executive Director of the Shingo Institute. Ken, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Well, it's really great to have you here, and you want to start off by getting your thoughts on the phrase habitual excellence. What does habitual excellence mean to you?
To me, I break it down into two different parts. Habitual means behaviors that you get so accustomed to doing they become a habit. And the second part of it is excellent. So it's those behaviors that drive excellence that you get so used to doing that they become a habit.
And it may well be that behaviors are grounded in principles, and that's something that's very important to, I know, to you and to the Shingo Institute. So can you talk to us
Yes.
about principles and why a principles-based approach to management and improvement is so important?
Well, let me give a little bit of background, and I'm going to flip and do a couple of slides here, if it's okay with
Yeah,
you.
please.
So let's go to that right there. Share. Okay. So in the Shingo Institute, our purpose is to help organizations drive for excellence, and so that's why habitual excellence is a good term that resonates with us. And we do that fundamentally by helping organizations improve the process of improvement. We need to learn how to improve better and better over time, and so that's one of the things we're trying to achieve. Let me go back a little bit in time and explain where we came from as an institute,
Mhm.
and start with our namesake, Shigeru Shingo. He was an industrial engineer who Toyota hired to help them develop the Toyota production system. He wrote several books, 17 total books, actually. In 1988, he came to our university at Utah State University, and we gave him an honorary doctorate and asked for permission to start a prize in his name, and he gave us permission to do that. And so in 1989, we awarded our first Shingo Prize. Now, fast forward a little bit in time, and for the first roughly 15 or so years of the Shingo Prize, it went mainly to manufacturing organizations located in North America.
Mhm.
It wasn't something that branched out beyond manufacturing, didn't branch out geographically either. And our model was these three things. If an organization had good lean systems and they had good lean tools and achieved good results, then they could receive a Shingo Prize. But unfortunately, what we found is that many organizations that received a Shingo Prize kept getting better, but unfortunately, a large number, over half, I hate to say, didn't. You would expect them to keep getting better because they're all about continuous improvement. But only a handful of them kept getting better year over year, even after receiving the Shingo Prize. And too often they would decline and falter and would see poor results. So we knew something was missing from our model. What was having good systems and tools and driving results for a period of time wasn't sufficient to make it sustainable. And so we did a research project starting in the early 2000s, almost 20 years ago now, where we went and talked to all of the different Shingo Prize recipient organizations, the ones that kept getting better,
Mhm.
and also the ones that didn't keep getting better. And we think we found that something that was missing. And it resulted in what we call our three insights. And let me kind of describe that, but let me go through it by talking about what they are. And as we go through it, I'll explain them.
Mhm.
Insight number one is that ideal results require ideal behaviors. Or if you want to go back to habits, they require ideal habits. We noticed that when we talked, especially to the organizations that kept getting better and better, even after receiving a Shingo Prize, they, to a large degree, had stopped talking about KPIs. They didn't look at KPIs as something they measured because them they would say, well, that's a lagging indicator. We've got to be able to control the outcome. And so they were talking about things they measured were mainly behaviors or habits, if you will, but behaviors. Let me give a very typical example of the type of conversation we had is Well, and since we'll talk a little bit more about safety as kind of a theme throughout our discussion today.
Yeah.
But I do want to give this example because it's typical of what we saw. We go to an organization and they say, yeah, we track the number of people who are hurt on the job and the number of days that they miss work because we have to. But that doesn't help at all. What we have to control are the behaviors. And so the real measurements that we really focus on are how many near misses do we have and how many prevention actions do we take to make sure that that near miss never results in somebody being hurt. And they would track those near misses reports and the error prevention activities around it, as opposed to numbers of days lost or number of people injured. That's what we mean by ideal behavior. You're preventing accidents from happening rather than counting them after the fact and trying to go back and figure out what caused it.
Yeah.
The second thing we found, it's especially in the organizations that keep getting better and better, is that they all had a clear purpose that everybody agreed with and rallied around. Yeah. So, and it was clear that that purpose drove those ideal behaviors. But what we also found, and we've supplemented this with further research, is that unless the organization then changed and made it easy for people to do the right thing, meaning that ideal behavior, then the people would get cynical about it and stop doing it because it was hard to do. They'd do the hard thing for a while, but until it became easy for them to do the right thing, it kind of wore on their patience, and they didn't want to keep doing the hard thing. It made them think the organization wasn't really serious about it. But when they changed the systems that made it easier for them to do the right thing, that's when it really seemed to become a sustainable activity. And the third thing we found is that whenever we asked those organizations that were getting better and better over time why they did something, they could always come back with a clear reason why. And I'll go back to the example of safety. We asked them, why did they focus on behaviors? And their answer was, because we care about our people, or we want them to feel safe, or something else. So they'd come back with a reason of showing deep concern for the people within the organization. And we started collecting all those different reasons that they gave us, and we put it in the form of principles. And we found there's some consistent principles that they could keep explaining, they kept using to explain why they did things. And so we incorporated those principles and collected them and put them together in what we call guiding principles. And this is, I mentioned we were missing some things in our model. This is our model that we have today. We still have the systems, tools, and results, but we have a culture piece that we define it to be the accumulation of all of the behaviors of the people in the organization. Don't tell us what your values are. Don't tell us what you believe. Let us observe what you do. And we also think those behaviors should be guided by principles. We also think that systems should be designed in such a way to help incorporate those principles into actions and so on. So this is the model that we use today. Looking at that principles diamond and then breaking it out into separate principles, we've developed 10 principles that we think are bedrock to improvement efforts. And we've put them into 3 different categories or dimensions. One is about building the right kind of culture. One is about the actual improvement process. And the other one is making sure those improvements are aligned to meet the needs of the customer and achieve the purposes of the organization. So there's a kind of a quick overview of that. And I'm happy to say that once we came out with this new model, it took off. We've had, instead of it just being North American manufacturers, we now have recipients in several different industries, including healthcare, which is particularly relevant to the value capture base, but also financial institutions, logistics institutions, military institutions, and so on. And we've also seen it grow internationally to where the Shingo price has truly become a global standard. And we think it's because that new model was able to articulate those key principles in such a powerful way that it's resonated with people around the world. So there's a little bit of an explanation of principles.
Yeah, and so one thing I'm struck by, and I remember the evolution of the Shingo model. I'll applaud the Shingo Institute for improving the way you evaluate and look at improvement systems. So you can
Yes.
improve the way you look at how people are improving the way they improve. There's another link in that chain.
Yes, it is, and thank you for pointing that out. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a minute and see and just demonstrate how the principles can help people understand some things better. And I'd like to focus a little bit on healthcare safety, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course, please.
Is that okay? So just for purposes of our discussion today, I've selected 3 different guiding principles that I think inform healthcare safety, particularly in a pandemic like we're experiencing right now. I was very troubled to find, as I researched and prepared for this, that over 10,000 healthcare workers in the United States have now got the virus. They've been exposed to it, caught it, experienced the unfortunate symptoms of it, and to me that's 10,000 too many. Mm-hmm. It means that we are unable to keep our healthcare workers safe when they are doing their jobs the way they're supposed to be doing their jobs, and which is caring for the others and not having to worry about their own safety. And so, to me, that's 10,000 cases of not respecting every individual by keeping them safe. We have to keep people safe in order to show respect to them. And it's very troubling to see that so many have been exposed and have caught the virus. Right. The goal should be, as we look to improve that so that no other healthcare workers become sick due to contracting the virus, is that we seek perfection. The goal should always be 0. Right. And that's one of the things that I think that Shingo was amazing at. If I go back to Shingo, and he was one who taught this idea of seeking perfection. I'm going to share one of his books just real quick here.
And for those of you who are listening, Ken is turning. He's got a bookshelf full of Shingo books behind him. Yep.
Here's the Shingo book right here. Maybe I'll switch this off for just a second and go back to this, and I'll share this book right here. It's called Zero Quality Control. Now, he uses this in terms of quality, but this is where he taught the principle of error proofing, or what he in Japanese is called poka-yoke. And poka-yoke means taking actions that prevent errors from happening. Right. And that's what that same principle can and should be, and Shingo would argue that you should be doing that in such a perfect way that you prevent quality problems or safety problems from ever occurring, because you have made it so that it cannot happen. Right. And that's the idea that we need to have in our heads. And I'll give a good parallel here, is the airline industry. How do we prevent airplanes from ever crashing? And they've been very disciplined over the many decades of flying, of every single time there's an accident, they find out what it is. And they also figure out how accidents might happen and try to take actions to prevent it. That's the same mentality we need to have. We need to have a mentality of seeking perfect elimination of healthcare workers being exposed to the virus. And so the principle of seek perfection applies. And the way we do that, and I'm going to go back and share once again, is back to the, there we go. Is the principle I also want to share is assure quality at the source. The way to do that is observe what happens that causes exposure to the virus and prevent something from causing it, whether it be a shield or a mask or a full hazmat suit. There's ways to prevent healthcare workers from being exposed, and it only happens when you focus on quality at the source. So I bring out those 3 principles. We could use a few others, such as scientific thinking, to experiment to see if that really works or something like that. But I bring out those 3 because when we would talk to the excellent organizations, and if they were facing a healthcare crisis like this, what they would say is, we respect everybody, so we want to make them safe. Our goal is to make sure that none of them have any safety issues while they're at work. And the way we do that is we go to the place where the work happens and we make sure that the precautions are taken to make sure that they do not get exposed to the virus and therefore they can't contract it because we've taken those protective measures.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, that's great. And I think, that's where there's really good parallel between what you're talking about and what the Shingo Institute teaches and recognizes, and what the founder of Value Capture, Paul O'Neill, talked about. Mr. O'Neill was very serious about the idea that, from an employee standpoint, when he was CEO of Alcoa, that nobody should get hurt when they come to work.
mm-hmm.
And the same thing applies in patient safety, that we don't want anybody getting hurt, that we're driving towards zero. And I think the way you articulate all of this, when you talk about behaviors, you talk about poka-yoke, and you talk methods. Like this is not just a slogan. Like, it's easy for someone to say something like, "We're aiming for zero," but there's got to be a method that really helps drive us toward that reality, right?
There is, and that's where Shingo excelled, because he was the one. I mean, he focused on manufacturing, but he gives hundreds and hundreds of different examples of how companies that he worked with went about reducing the errors that could happen and made sure they couldn't happen, and then their defect rate went down, or their safety incident rate went down. It was more about relentless tactical pursuit of every single possible issue that might ever come up and preventing it from ever being able to cause a problem.
Yeah, and I think that's another really important point. You alluded to this earlier with what they've done in aviation. It's not enough to just react when there is an incident that causes loss of life or injury. They're proactively looking at, like you said, potential issues, and then looking at near misses. And
Mm-hmm.
aviation has mandatory non-punitive reporting systems.
Mm-hmm.
Where there is a way of sharing and learning from these near misses. We don't have that in healthcare. But I was wondering if you could talk to some of the principles and some of the leadership behaviors that would create an environment where it's safe for people to bring up these risks and near misses.
And I'll give a couple of examples of really bad behavior or bad leadership. The story of the emergency department physician that was fired for reporting that they had inadequate amounts of PPE equipment to keep the people safe. And he reported up the chain, no response. He went to a local newspaper and got fired for it.
Yeah.
And that's totally bad leadership. This is not a safe environment either. Physically, you're being exposed to a virus, but also emotionally and mentally. It's the wrong thing to do, no matter how you look at it. There has to be a safety, emotional safety around a safety discussion. It should never be something that's taboo. It's something that really does. If leaders don't show that they care about people's safety, what they're saying is, you're disposable. I don't care about you. And that's wrong. People will not respond to that. They won't feel safe. They won't act safe. You drive bad behaviors by leading in that way. The only way to get effective results is by listening, being open to it, and being committed to respecting people by keeping them safe.
Yeah. And we probably would agree. We should go back and we wish some of these things didn't happen, but they have. So now, what do healthcare leaders, healthcare organizations, what does society learn from that? What do we do differently going forward? What are your thoughts?
Well, first, for those who might not already have it, and I'm unfortunately, I see too many in the healthcare industry that don't have it, but I do see some shining examples of some organizations that do. I love the story that I read about Mount Sinai in New York, which is a wonderful story about keeping, in the midst of the deluge of patients coming in, how did they triple their capacity while at the same time keeping their healthcare workers safe? It's a great story. So you might want to share, put that on your next one or something like that. But there's too many examples of that not happening. And I think it's, first of all, a mindset problem. The leaders don't think about it. They're thinking about how do we take care of the patients and how do we make, and that sort of thing. They sometimes forget the healthcare providers. And they've got to, I think you can't actually make the patient safe until after you've made the healthcare provider safe, because the healthcare providers are the ones who can ensure the safety of the patients, but only and only if and only if they are safe themselves.
Right.
And so it's got to be a mindset change in the leaders to think we can do that. We can keep the healthcare workers safe. We can fix these things so that we can guarantee their safety, because this is the equipment we provide. This is the training we provide. This is the process we follow to make sure that they are always safe. And getting their input is often the best way to do it. Getting the actual healthcare, who's providing the healthcare, those people involved in the process is an important part, because they know where their vulnerabilities will be. But it's a mindset change, and that mindset has to be seek perfection, or let's seek for eliminating all exposures to the virus for our healthcare workers.
Yeah, and hopefully people who are listening who maybe work in areas outside of healthcare where they're thinking about reopening an office or rethinking a workplace. In healthcare, it's in a lot of cases there's not that option. There's that necessity to figure out how to provide needed care, in the safest way possible. And I know you have some thoughts, if you're willing to share. The Shingo Institute is, of course, based at Utah State University, and I know you and people there have been giving thought to the idea of, how would you most safely reopen a campus? That's a new challenge, an important challenge to think through, right?
I've actually respect. We have a committee. I'm not on the committee, but I know some of the people who are, and we have a committee that's working on that. And part of it is how do you maintain social distancing in a classroom?
Right.
And I'll use an example of one of the business school classrooms, because we actually went and measured it out. But depending on how you measure, there's optimal seating that you might be able to get 6 feet distance between every single student in the classroom. You turn an 80-seat classroom into roughly a 22-seat classroom or something like that. And so right now our discussions are around how can we deliver as much face-to-face time as we can, which is part of the university campus experience, and also maintain good social distancing, and also maintain good hygienic care. And so some of the things that we've talked about are how often do we need to wipe down desks? How do we need to have the students come in one door and out the other door? How many more sections are we going to have to add if we've got 21 students in an 80-seat classroom, and therefore instead of teaching one group of 80, you have 4 groups of 20. Maybe they're all in the same class, but then you have 4 different sections that you have to meet with on a periodic basis. So we're looking at revising our curriculum in such a way where we're expecting smaller groups, and we're expecting that it'll be almost impossible to do all classes face to face. So how can we build a hybrid where we have a great face to face experience in the times we're able to meet face to face, and then do some virtual or some asynchronous online interactions as well. And we're going to leave that up to the faculty. Mm-hmm. But it's a difficult issue to work with. I am very pleased, though, that I can understand why they did it, but I'm very pleased that we're committed to not doing it the way that the Cal State system has decided, just to go all online for the fall. We'd like to continue the on-campus experience to make it as robust as possible, while still keeping students and faculty safe.
Yeah, yeah. because it comes back to first things first.
Yes.
Yeah.
First things first in this case is how can we make sure everybody's safe and then give them the best education that we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's two important missions around safety
Yes.
and education. So, again, our guest today, I want to thank Ken Snyder, the executive director of the Shingo Institute. And Ken, if you want to let the viewers or listeners, whichever it may be, know how can they learn more about the Shingo Institute, the Shingo Model, and the Shingo Prize, and yeah.
So just a couple of things. One is you can learn more about the Shingo model. We have a model booklet that's available electronically. You can go to shingo.org and download the model booklet. It's free of charge, and that's one way to just get a good background of it. If you want to learn more, we work very closely with a number of organizations. We call them affiliates, our affiliate partners. Value Capture happens to be one of our affiliate partners. We have a complete list of our affiliate partners on our website at shingo.org. Contact one of them or Value Capture.
Okay. And if you want to contact Value Capture, the website is valuecapturellc.com. But Ken, thank you for the partnership with Value Capture, and thank you for what you're doing to help share and really encourage this principles-based approach to leadership and operational excellence, and it's great stuff. So thank you again for being our guest here.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.